She is essentially slut shaming. That's what happens when you just parrot antiquated scripture without thinking it through. You end up, having no idea what you're talking about. That's a huge red flag. That is a tremendously huge red flag for anybody in a relationship. And it's just like, again, this was, when I saw this at the end of the interview, I knew I had to post about it because this is just, this is crazy. This is crazy stuff. She doesn't know the love languages. And she's out here, giving you advice on love and relationships. But if they are operating and they're in love without knowing the love languages, it's like flying a plane without knowing how to read the instrument. You have a tremendous biological proclivity for sex. Okay, so if anyone that tells you different, they have no idea what they're talking about.
I think the weak shame people.
Carry it with a sense of guilt and shame the way that she is describing, kind of portraying it here, I think is more reflective on her and her judgmentalism and her naivete than really what's happening in the human condition. What is your love language? She doesn't know what the answer. She says they're all of them. Okay, and that is a huge red flag for anybody that I would consider dating or having in my love life, and also somebody that I would take advice from. You can just tell that she is loaded with antiquated ideology that is not applicable to contemporary times. For that, because her opinions are being colored by her lack of experience, okay? So she doesn't have any experience in the dating world. So see, as you can see, she's already switched away from the impulses discussion and now saying that because they're paying for the sex, they are weak men. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Good Problems Podcast. I am your host, David Nima. I am an attorney with over 15 years of experience, and I'm also a life coach, author of the book, Good Problems to Have, The Anatomy of Contemporary Happiness. In today's episode, we are going to critique Candace Owens, who is an influencer that likes to discuss social issues. And, she's all over the place in this video. First, she just categorizes men who actually hire sex workers as weak, quote unquote. And because they, quote unquote, give in to their impulses, right? Which is ridiculous. And I don't know what she means by weak. It's actually a kind of a buzzword. It doesn't have really meaning. I think what she means is non-confident people or men. Nevertheless, she categorizes their activity of hiring sex workers as weak. Then she says that they're weak not because they want sex, but because they're paying for it. So that's why they're weak, because they're paying for the sex. Then she, like I said, she's all over the place. Then she changes her position and says that sex workers are addicted to sex. And she's having a discussion here with Olivia Bentley, who is a former sex worker at the Bunny Ranch. And she is now kind of an influencer that discusses intimacy issues. And then she goes on to say that sex workers don't offer anything else to society besides their body. And then finally, I think she really kind of proves that she has no idea what she's talking about when it comes to love and sex, because she doesn't even know what the 5 languages of love is. She doesn't know the languages of love. When she gets asked at the end of this interview, what is your love language? She doesn't know what the answer. She says they're all of them. Okay, and that is a huge red flag for anybody that I would consider dating or having in my love life, and also somebody that I would take advice from. So let's take a look at this video. Candace Owens would be the worst mother-in-law that you can possibly think of, and I can't even begin to imagine what her kids are going to go through. But she would be, if she was my mother-in-law and I was considering marrying her daughter, let's just say, I would run for the hills, and I think you should too. So let's watch a few clips, and I'll give you some commentary.
I would offer that I think that your clientele list is an examination of the weakest men that our society has to offer.
The police officers, the federal agent, but
men that cannot control their impulses are weak.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my belief.
Well,
without question. And strong men are men that have impulses, and yet they keep those impulses in check. And those are the most desirable men that are in our society.
Any man that wants casual sex is bad to you.
Because that's
basically what they're wanting.
They're paying
Yeah.
And paying for you. They're going to a brothel with a...
See, as you can see, she's already switched away from the impulses discussion and now saying that because they're paying for the sex, they are weak men. So assuming, according to her, if you're just a playboy and you're sleeping around with women all over the place, but you're not paying for it, then you're not weak. So this is, I mean, she's just contradictory.
Rather than drinking a girl into it at the bar, which is what we typically see.
Well, I don't think most men are date rapists.
Okay,
either.
so now she's categorizing having a few drinks with someone on a date to try to have sex as date raping. There's a huge difference between date raping and having drinks that leads to sex, consensual sex. And that's obviously a very important point. But the way that she's just jumping around here and she's so judgmental, I mean, you got to be careful. And also look at her body language. Look how she's holding her hands like this, as if, like, look how tightly she's gripped it. Isn't it almost like, I mean, her knuckles are just popping out over there. And she just, if you see her full body language and the way she's kind of, crossed her legs and protecting herself, I mean, she is not comfortable in this situation. At the same time, look at Olivia's body language. She's sitting straight forward and just totally being open during the discussion. It's just Candace is just repeating stuff that's been taught to her without have thought it through on a deeper level. And she really lacks, I think, empathy, compassion, and an understanding of human nature.
I think a real man.
Oh, that's...
Yeah, look at that. Look at that body language. That is just completely, closed off.
I think that's what allows
Hey, babe,
you
let
to
me
know.
buy you a drink. And,
That's what allows me to know
that.
that you only see the worst parts of
I've
our
been in
society.
it.
Yeah.
Haven't you? I mean, have you?
Well, you were
did
married
you
to
ever
an
go?
alcohol. You said you were married to an alcoholic, right? So
Well, I didn't even know he was
I
at the
think
time.
that
But
your
yeah.
opinions are being colored by your experiences on a day-to-day basis.
No.
So remember that, because her opinions are being colored by her lack of experience, okay? So she doesn't have any experience in the dating world. So let's just continue here.
Going to the bar, being involved, going out to the bar as a youngin', getting there and having guys, come up and hit on you and want to buy you drinks and then keep wanting to buy you drinks because they're trying to take you home.
Yeah, but also you have men that just come up and talk to you and they're not trying to get you drunk. On
Sure.
the side.
They're both good.
One who's trying to ply you with liquor.
See, again, I think if you're listening to this, I don't care if you're a man or a woman, you should never be trying to ply your date with liquor, obviously. If you guys want to have a few drinks together, you shouldn't have a few. It's not about what you do. It's about how you do it. So you don't want to get drunk on a date. You don't want to get someone else drunk on a date if you guys don't know each other. But there's a huge distinction between having drinks over a date and trying to ply someone with liquor. And she's just jumping all over the place.
To have a conversation with me about things that we agreed on.
And
and that's an example of a real man.
Yeah.
So
A real man. That's another red flag.
Of men are the ones who walk into a brothel. Perhaps weaker than them are men that attempt to date rape someone, which is what you're basically describing. A typical college scene of everybody's drunk and having a good time. But the whole point is men grow up. You learn to have conversations with women. You learn how to ask a woman on a date.
Okay.
And you don't need drugs or sex or money that would be better spent somewhere outside of a brothel to do it. You
Sure.
Actually, it's sad if you, as a man, have to pay for sex.
So, not really. Okay, so
it's
let's
really
phrase
sad.
it this way. There's hot guys coming in all the
They
time.
ask you how they look. There are weak hot men.
Okay, so
They're
all
good-looking
right.
men
So I'm
are
going to
incredibly
put it
weak.
to you like this. So let's look at this. So we've got this group of guys here, and they're like, "I want to go out and have a good time. Hoping I get laid. Let's go to the club." And then we got these guys, and they're like, "Well, we could go to this world famous bunny ranch. There's all these hot pros. They're really skilled. They're getting tested. We're wearing condoms, and we're going to be helping them out. And to me, it's a gentlemanly gesture. If you're wanting to get on with me and you don't want a relationship." What? You know what I mean? Like, come on. So them coming in and saying, "Hey, let me put some money on your books, pay your bills, and let's go have a safe encounter in a controlled environment." Shame on you, Olivia Bentley, but this stuff going on over here at the bar,
Well, first thing I would say is false dichotomy. There's more options for men. The thing that I would say is that the most pathetic thing that a man can do is to pay for sex.
Yeah, no, there's a lot more pathetic things that a man can do or a woman can do than pay for sex. Okay. It actually reminds me of just, I was having discussions with somebody that regularly, hired sex workers, and I asked him, and he was a successful, good-looking person that had a lot of money and just very smart. He was a professional colleague of mine. And you ask him, you say, "Hey, let me ask you, you're a good-looking guy. Why don't you, date somebody? Why don't you get married? Why don't you at least go to the bar that night and pick up somebody while you're on a trip rather than paying for a sex worker. And basically he told me, you're not paying them to have sex, you're paying them to leave. Okay? So there's a logic there that Candace has no idea about. So let's listen a little bit more.
And I think that men know that is why when men are porn addicts, it's something that they are shameful of, it's something that they hide. They're not watch porn in public. You're not going to see a person at work just on their phone, watching pornography or someone.
The reason people don't watch pornography at work is because it's probably against their policies, and it's just frowned upon to consume pornography in public if you're on a bus or a metro or at work. Okay, that doesn't mean that you're ashamed of watching pornography. Okay, if you're doing anything in a manic method, if you're doing anything manically to a degree where it's harming you and it's getting in the way of your social life and it's getting in the way of your sleep and your health, then of course that can be a problem. But just the consumption of anything, of porn, alcohol, none of this stuff is by itself harmful. It depends on how you do it. And
Trauma trained watching pornography is something that you hide because men know it's shameful. Men know that it is a form of weakness. Otherwise, they would do it out in the open.
I think the weak shame people.
Exactly. And again, look at her body language. But absolutely, anybody who is shaming anybody else, again, it just stems from their own personal insecurity. And you can critique people with compassion and empathy and really state it in a way that, hey, this is not for me. This is not my lifestyle, right? I'm critiquing you because I don't like that. My lifestyle is for my own personal choice. And that's the way I like to run my lifestyle. And it doesn't mesh with me, right? It doesn't mesh with me. So you can say that, I'm critiquing you. But to shame somebody is, I think, a sign of weakness, as Olivia is letting Candace know here.
Are open and honest about human sexuality. That's what I tend to see.
I don't think that it's normal human sexuality to walk into a brothel and pay for sex. I think men and women come together naturally. I don't think that even if you look at biology, if you look at the history of humanity, if you look at animals, that you have to pay to have sex. It doesn't have to be like, here's some food so that you will have sex with me. That's just not how it works.
I am pretty sure in the animal kingdom, some other animals bring gifts to their potential mates for the possibility of mating. So giving gifts as a way of mating, I'm sure, is rich in the animal kingdom. And, and again, Candace is just talking, out of her, untrained life experience, lack of life experience. She just read a few things and she's just regurgitating what she was taught. She has not thought this through. She's not deep thinking on this one.
Why has sex workers been, why is it the oldest profession in the world then? Isn't that interesting?
Well, we call it the oldest profession in the world, yeah, and I think it's something that's never going to go away. And I think that's why when you said to me, how do you solve something like this permanently? And first, I think by fostering a conversation of honesty, I think that it's actually getting worse, not better, that we're seeing more categories of this sort of perversity with the onset of OnlyFans, social media, and the internet. It has actually made men fall deeper into porn addiction. That's actually what it is. It's pornography addiction. And there was less incident.
So she's not really answering the question yet, that why is sex work one of the oldest professions in the world? And there's definitely some truth to that.
Of it when there wasn't so much media and there wasn't so much exposure, which provided for men to be able to focus more. The examples of...
The truth is, as human beings, we want compassion. We want companionship. And we want it with the opposite sex. Sometimes we want it with the same sex. So this is one of the most natural things, is to want to have sex, and getting it via paying, dating someone. As long as you're not harming anybody, I don't see any kind of issue there. And Candace here has antiquated mindset.
Stronger men, I think, exist as a relic of the past.
Stronger men.
Because there wasn't so many options being given to them all the time.
What do you say to the men that tell me you're going to have to pay for it one way or the other? Having a wife is way more expensive. What do we say to them when they say that?
That's trendy. It's a trendy thing that people say.
That's something that
for
people,
one or other.
yeah. Well, it's kind of
Well, I
trendy
would
when
say,
people say
yeah,
that it's
I
the
would
most
say-
pathetic, weak thing to have to pay a woman.
No.
So, yeah, absolutely. Again, you're not paying her to have sex. You're paying her to leave because it's more expensive to wife her up or become, get into a relationship. Same thing works with women, too. Some women don't want the relationship and they'd rather just have sex and, go about their day. So without any kind of formal marriage and commingling of assets and things of that nature. So again, she is definitely kind of going at it in terms of, saying that these men are weak. And she has no idea what she's talking about. And again, this is one of the oldest trades in human history. It happens all over the animal kingdom too, having sex. It's a very natural thing to do. And to carry it with a sense of guilt and shame, the way that she is described, kind of portraying it here, I think is more reflective on her and her judgmentalism and her naivete than really what's happening in the human condition.
I don't think that's a common phrase anybody said. I definitely didn't take it from anybody.
Well,
but the one that you're saying is a common one. You're going to pay for
A lot of
it.
haters will say
Yeah,
that.
I would remind them that having a wife and a child and a family is the greatest blessing in the entire world. If you're talking about paying because you have bills and you...
So this is an arbitrary position on her part. She's saying that having a family and children is the greatest blessing in the world. That's obviously not true. The greatest blessing in the world is to be happy and doing what makes you happy. Having a family unit is not for everybody. Some people just can't have it, So she's just totally narrow-minded here, saying that, you need to, either have this, family structure or, you're basically weak for trying to kind of have your needs met.
You are paying, as we are right now, as we consider what school we're going to put our children into, and you're paying for daycare for your children. There's nothing, I would spend that money 80 million times over for the love and the joy and the warmth and the security that my family provides me. It is the most aspirational thing that you can pay for.
Okay, that's through her eyes, and no one's judging her for that. But her judging others for, hiring sex workers or being sex workers and throwing all these pejoratives at them that they're addicted and they don't bring anything else to society and that they're weak. This is the kind of judgmentalism and naivete that you absolutely want to run from. And again, if Candace Owens was my potential mother-in-law and I was sitting across the dining table with her and she was talking like this and, I'm potentially going to marry her daughter, I would run for the hills. I would absolutely run for the hills. The amount of chutzpah that it takes. Look at the look on her face and how confident she is, how confident she's trying to be while also being so judgmental. And then she's just completely, naive. She is completely naive. And we haven't even gotten to the love language section here, which really just shows her cards. So let's talk some more.
Do you think it's okay for other people to have different viewpoints and to have different realities and maybe something else feels good to...
Good for Olivia. Good for Olivia here. Just really kind of, turning the table on her and showing her that there are other people that have different realities and different preferences. And she's asking her, do you think that's okay? Do you think that's okay? And she strikes me as someone with tremendous amount of compassion and understanding and zero judgment. Good for her.
Them and is right for them, that to you seems foreign.
I think it's totally fine for people to live their lives in the way that they would like to live their lives. But what I require is that people speak honestly about that. And I do not think that any person who is having sex with 10 men, different men per day, is a happy person.
So she's saying I require people to speak honestly about that. So all the stuff that she said earlier, that these are weak men and that these are sex addicts, I guess she doesn't really mean that. I guess the only thing that she really wants people to do is be straightforward about whatever they're engaged in, such as how Olivia is, for example. So she is all over the place, and this is a new narrative now, being a few minutes into this video.
I refuse to believe that is happiness achieved. Do I believe that there are some people who genuinely don't want family, who don't want to have a husband, who don't want to have kids, yeah, they're the exception.
No, so they're absolutely not the exception. You look at the statistics right now, and increasingly more people genuinely don't want a spouse and genuinely don't want kids. And she's trying to characterize these people as this kind of narrow exception or this biological defect, which is absolutely, I think, gross and just naive and wrong. So she's just pushing this kind of viewpoint that she has been indoctrinated by without deep thinking.
Biology gets it wrong sometimes. Sometimes genetics just don't get it right.
Ridiculous.
People don't aspire to things that you would think
Ridiculous.
they have a biological proclivity for. But that's the exception, not the rule. And I'm certainly not going to try to force someone who says, I hate children, I don't want children.
Again, you have a tremendous biological proclivity for sex. Okay, so if anyone that tells you different, they have no idea what they're talking about.
That's not you. I'm just giving an
Right.
example
Oh, I know.
to, force
Yeah.
them into a lifestyle that they're obviously
They won't be happy.
they won't be happy in.
Right.
Happy.
But what I have trouble with is trying to normalize the abnormal, and I think
See?
that as I
Trying to normalize the abnormal. That's abnormal to you, Candace. It's abnormal to you.
said, in the circumstance of a woman, especially a woman, having sex with 10 different partners in one day,
That's a little much.
I think people
don't.
said 5 to 10 clients in a day.
Well, after the HBO special, things were crazy. And that place was on fire. And people were just all over the place. And it was one of these things. But honestly, what happened is, so with women, you get more orgasmic the more you go. You go and you get addicted. You go and you have this rush, and you might have an orgasm, and then you make all this money, and it's like, oh my goodness, and if you have fun, and you enjoyed your time, then you're right back in the shower, and you're getting all ready, and you're going right back out to meet someone new. So that's kind of what happens. You get all woohoo, you get all wild. Yeah, you're like, oh my goodness gracious, I want to get going here, and you're excited about it.
That's credence to what I was saying earlier. There's an element of this that is addicting. It's an
It can be addicting, yeah. So
Now, they're using the term addiction as kind of something that she likes and she likes doing more. Addiction only means addiction. If something is addicting negatively, when you are doing it manically to a level where you're harming yourself, you're losing sleep, you're spending a lot of money on it, you're putting yourself at tremendous risk, this is not addiction. She's just talking about that she enjoys doing what she's doing and she wants to go back to it. So let's listen some more and carry that distinction with you anytime someone uses the word addiction.
not good to lean into,
Well,
whether it's drinking or whether it's sex.
if you like your job and that's what you're doing for work and that's
like
the
your
money and you
alcohol,
like the sex,
you like your alcohol,
it's not affecting you.
See, they're talking past each other here. So she's saying that if you like your alcohol, then alcoholics like their alcohol, and nymphomaniacs like their sex. And she's talking again. Addiction is you can drink alcohol and not be addicted. You can have sex with a lot of people and not be addicted. Addiction means you're doing something manically to a level where it's starting to harm your social circle. It's starting to, you're missing your kid's soccer game, for example, because you're gambling too much, or you're missing your kid's soccer game because you're shopping too much, right? So there's a lot of different types of things that can be done in an addicting way. And it just really depends on whether or not you are harming yourself or those around you for this activity. And if you're not doing that, and if you're doing this in a healthy way, that's not addiction.
Negatively. Drinking alcohol and having an alcohol addiction and then doing this for work, to me it's athleticism. I mean, we're like in motion, you know what I mean? It's like, so for me it's a physical activity.
Yeah, it's kind of reminds me of like a Charlie Sheen interview, and he was like, high on crack cocaine, talking about how he's got tiger blood and he's, this
What is she
his
talking
special
about?
mechanism and this works for him. You're talking about an addiction. You're saying, well, I like it, so it's fine.
I like it.
Most people
I
tend to like their addiction. That's why they're addicted to them. A cokehead likes cocaine. A sex addict likes sex, and it's kind of implied. But you just said
See?
there's an element that's addicting. You said you get on, you're turned on,
I think
you want to see the next person.
I like what I do, but I'm naturally introverted, believe it or not, and I'm not like that. I'm not wired like that. Like, I haven't even had sex like all week. That's totally fine. I've been so busy training. I haven't even had time to think of it. So I'm not one of those that I'm constantly thinking of getting it on. And when I'm home, I don't. I'm so busy. I'm going to the gym, and there's a lot of hot guys at the gym. I don't get on that.
If she was addicted, if she was a sex addict, she would not be going through these kind of periods of not having sex. So she's trying to kind of defend herself here because Candace is throwing pejoratives at her and saying that she's, oh, look, you just said that you're a sex addict. And she's just saying that she likes sex and she likes what she's doing. She enjoys it and empowers her. And this is a noble, great profession. And people like Candace that shame people for, doing this kind of activity on the men or the women that are the hiring party and the sex workers. I mean, that's a real problem in society.
I'm in my zone. I build community there. So I'm not out romping around and going all crazy. So it's not that. It's just, to speak of the times when we had a lot of people coming in, that would be the dynamic, and it was crazy. But we were making money hand over fist.
Yeah, which comes down to the fact that it does always boil down to
the money.
Yeah,
it does, because we will create,
What always boils down to the money? I mean, this whole conversation started saying that, sex people, guys who hire sex workers are weak. And she's obviously completely stepped away from that kind of argument. But again, so she's all over the place here, and Olivia is just making such really good, rational points here in a non-judgmental way, and is really kind of holding Candace's hand and trying to kind of bring her to a more rational side and perspective of this entire discussion, because you can just tell that she is loaded with antiquated ideology that is not applicable to contemporary times.
Our personas are real wild and stuff, right? But this is our means of living, respectively. So that doesn't mean, because sometimes, like, a guy might have the perception, that lady is a complete nympho. I just got to get a few drinks in her, and she's mine for free. Do you know what we're charging? We're charging a lot. I did a $25,000 24-hour party, gave half to Dayton High School. The high schools will call in and they'll need help. So we're kind of the community backbone in ways for fundraisers, but the wrestling team needed mats. So they called in. I did a 24-hour date with a regular, gave them half, and they got their mats. And then the marching band actually approached Dennis at a restaurant, and they said, look, we just won a prestigious trip over to D.C. We can't afford the outfits. And he was so cool, and he could drum this all up, and we did a fundraiser, and we got him outfits. So, I mean, my point on that is, like, we charge a lot of money. So therein lies, like, the distinction. Like, yeah, we do enjoy what we do, but we're not these crazy nymphos, like, out there running around.
Yeah, I don't.
Professionals.
I wouldn't want to sell my body for money, and I think that these are.
Okay, so that's the most commonsensical thing that Candace has said throughout this entire podcast, which is, I wouldn't want to sell my body for money. Okay? That's fine. That's her personal preference. Everything else throughout this whole discussion has been judgmentalism. And I want you guys to pay attention to this kind of language that is, divisive, judgmental. And again, I would hate to have Candace as a mother-in-law. I would hate it. I would hate it. I'd hate it enough that I would break up with my girlfriend or boyfriend just so I don't have Candace as a mother-in-law or this type of ideology as a future mother-in-law. Because this is a recipe for not only a potential failed marriage, but just your own personal, anguish, living under this cast of judgment, especially considering that she's highly naive in the world of dating and relationships. She is clearly naive and a non-experience. She might have some experience and gravitas when it comes to political commentary, but when it comes to social relationships, she's nothing more than just an echo of antiquated scripture and ideology. There's no kind of novel, thinking. There's no deep thinking here, and there's nothing that she's adding to the conversation except parroting the old sayings that, oh my God, you're basically, a weak person because you like sex or you give in to your sexual proclivities.
I guess some differences between you and I and sex workers that we're never going to get over, because there's no price tag that somebody could put on my self-respect.
Good.
And
Okay.
counting $25,000 at the end of the day, knowing that I had to sleep with multiple men to get it, would be something that I wouldn't be able to like lay my pillow at night, and I wouldn't be able to look at my daughter, I wouldn't be able to look at my son. And so yeah, it's different.
Look at how Olivia feels bad for her that she wouldn't be able to look at her daughter if she had to sell her body. I mean, that is something to really feel bad for. Is that like you know your love for your daughter is so kind of conditional that if you're not if you're ashamed of your job, you're not going to look at your daughter in the eye. I mean, and Olivia just truly, genuinely expresses kind of compassion for that, because, she feels bad that like Candace is kind of, approaching love and relationships in this way. Just listen to a little bit more, because this is where it gets good.
I think for everybody, but in closing,
What is your love language?
what do you mean by that?
Your love language.
What do you mean by that? So that's clearly an indication that she has, look at her lips too. She has no idea what that means. She has no idea what love languages are. Of course, we discussed love and the 5 languages of love in chapter 3 of the book titled Love. And that's a huge red flag. That is a tremendously huge red flag for anybody in a relationship, first of all. But also someone talking about this as social commentary to the masses and trying to influence people about love and relationships. And she doesn't know the love languages. She doesn't know the love languages. Listen.
Like, are you physical? Are you acts of service? Are you verbal?
Oh, this is like
love language.
I actually would probably say all of them.
That's a classic answer. That is a classic answer of somebody who has no idea what that means. And it's like, oh yeah, I'll do all of them. It's a classic answer. And it's just like, again, this was when I saw this at the end of the interview, I knew I had to post about it, because this is just, this is crazy. This is crazy stuff. She doesn't know the love languages. And she's out here, giving you advice on love and relationships and sex. So, man, this is exactly the type of, like I said, false confidence that these judgmental people have. That's what happens when you just parrot antiquated scripture without thinking it through. You end up, having no idea what you're talking about.
Okay. Mine is acts of service and physical. So it's kind of like, it truly is. And sometimes I've got to remind myself, hey, you've got to do the verbal too. Some men want
That's a good love language for her line of work.
the verbal. So even though I don't need all that verbal reassurance, I have to learn to do it, right? But physical and acts of service is mine.
That is somebody that is just so in tune with like love and emotions. The way that she understands that some people want that the verbal words of affirmation, in addition to the physical, in addition to the acts of service, they want the verbal words of affirmation. And she adjusts her love language for that person. That's love. That is love. That is true love. Congratulations, Olivia.
It makes sense with how I demonstrate and express love. But when the one comes, I am open for it.
I hope he comes. What do you hope that young women learn from you in this discussion?
Just to get a more leveled perspective on it. I'm not trying to advocate for people to jump in. It is tough
Good
work.
for her.
You're having to, learn men and manage men, right? But just to know that, we are smart human beings. We are respectable businesswomen. We deserve respect. So let's can the harsh judgments. And I appreciate that we were able to open it up and get deeper into the discussion.
And I want to be clear that I don't think that sex workers deserve disrespect unless they're being disrespectful, which I think was an example on the Whatever podcast of people that were intentionally trying to be disrespectful.
Yes.
But as I said at the end of the Whatever podcast, I will say here is that I do think that they are worthy of prayers, and I hope that they know that there is a lot more that they have to offer in society than their bodies. And there are other ways to find success. And of course, praying for them is because I do believe that the person that you need to find isn't necessarily a husband, but might be Jesus Christ.
There you have it in terms of, and I'll just comment on this last point here, and that it's finally coming back to Jesus Christ, right? And it's just, this was almost tough to watch, except that Olivia was just so fantastic in her presentation of what it's like to be a sex worker and just refuting her judgmentalism and really kind of teaching Candace a thing or two in this interview. But there you have it. That's a clear example of somebody that is naive and judgmental, and just kind of talks and judges sex workers, and trying to characterize the men who hire them as weak, then trying to characterize the women who do it as sex addicts, then talking about, that they don't contribute anything else to society, while Olivia here is raising money for her local high schools. And as she said it, she's kind of one of the backbones of the community there, and now Olivia is the successful business person with tremendous experience and doing advocacy work. And the love languages that Candace clearly doesn't know. And it's just such a red flag. I can't tell you how much of a red flag this is. And it's a really good filter, litmus test for you in terms of if you want to, be in love with someone. Yeah, you want to at least make sure that they're aware of the love languages. Maybe they're not aware of it and you can show it to them. But if they are operating and they're in love without knowing the love languages, it's like flying a plane without knowing how to read the instruments, right? You might be able to do it kind of instinctually, but the person that can read those instruments is a professional, that they can know, they can navigate various, conditions much more successfully because they can read those instruments. They know the language. And the same thing with love. You got to know the 5 languages of love if you want love and you want to be in love with others. So hope you enjoyed this podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Good Problems podcast on YouTube and Instagram. I'm your host, David Nima, and I'll see you in the next episode.